At Brand Secrets and Strategies, you learn how to save valuable time and money, where you learn strategies to get your products on more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers, empowering brands and raising the bar.
So everyone, thank you for being here today. I appreciate that. As usual, I mean, this has been a lot of fun putting together these webinars, and today we've got something that's really important to share with you, helping you develop the strategies or think about different ways to help keep your business afloat and help you take advantage of incremental opportunities. So with that said, thinking beyond equity and alternative funding solutions that will help you weather the storm. And Jessica's the perfect person to help with this conversation. Well, before we get started, I'd like to thank the people that are helping to support this. ECRM, Range Me, Whole Foods Magazine, Social Nature, C-Suite Network, C-Suite Radio, Bricktown Group, Promo Mash, Phil Limpert, the Supermarket Guru, Big Orange Productions, Summit Sales Consulting, Food Business Success, Base Camp, Plant-Based Solutions, 4 Points, Green Capital, Circle Partners, and Forest Brands. And again, thank you so much for them being here. Do me a favor and make sure you reach out to them and support them and let them know that you appreciate this. I couldn't do it without them. And when I say the way they're supporting me is just helping me make this available to you by promoting it and sharing it with their audiences. So why are we here? My mission is to make our healthy way of life more accessible by helping you get your products onto more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers. So please help me raise the bar in natural and share all these valuable resources with any brand that you know, any friend, etc. And as a part of this, I leaned in after Expo West was canceled and started doing these to help you grow and scale your brand. So let me know what keeps you up at night. What are those bottlenecks you'd like to see solved? And I will do my best to either put them on the podcast, on the YouTube channel, or put them on this webinar. And this is actually one of the topics that people have been asking me: how do you grow and scale and fund your brand in unique times? And so with that, Jerry, and let me introduce you to Jessica. So Jessica, one second. Okay. So Jessica, thanks for coming on today. I appreciate your being here. Could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey to where you're at today?
Yeah, first and foremost, thanks for having me, Dan. Really
I can't
appreciate
hear
it.
you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Okay, great. So thank you for having me, first and foremost. I appreciate it. Yeah, so my name's Jessica. I am with Dwight Funding. Dwight Funding provides working capital solutions, all in the form of a revolving line of credit, lending on AR, and lending on inventory, but we do so primarily to growing consumer product brands. So we understand the space very well, understand the needs of a growing brand in this space very well, and we really make it a point to immerse ourselves in, one, the community, but also just have a general understanding, or really actually an in-depth understanding of the various funding solutions out there. As our funding provides a solution for very specific needs, there's a lot of other financial products available to brands as they scale that might be a better fit or might cater to a specific cash crunch that a company is experiencing. So while we love to work with businesses in this space and help them fund their working capital needs as they scale, we try to take a more consultative approach to helping brands find the best solution for them, whether that's us or whether that's another product, and really educate founders and financial teams to figure out what the best solution for them is as they scale.
Perfect.
Yes, I'll stop there.
No, that's actually a good start. I mean, and so why does this matter? So one of the things we've talked about last week, or a couple of weeks ago, we had Stu on Green Circle Capital, and we've had other people on that have talked about the importance of having enough money to grow and scale your brand. What's unique about this particular topic is that those are things you need to be thinking about long in advance. You can't just call up a VC or an investor and then get the money right away. If a large retailer, for example, were to say, hey, we want you in a bunch of different stores, we need you to pivot and come up with a new package or whatever. Sometimes you need money or you need cash right away. And that's the point of this. It's giving you something extra tools in your toolbox that you can leverage to help with your growth. So with that framed that way, first of all, is that a fair representation? And what could you add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that first and foremost, you brought up a really important topic, which is you can't just go to a VC. You can't just go to a debt provider when it's cash crunch time and expect to be funded right away. So what does that mean, and how does a brand prepare for that scenario? I would say one of the most important things is initially many brands focus on top line growth, which is very important, right? Everybody wants to grow. But oftentimes the financing and the bookkeeping and all that, what I think is really important stuff is often put on the back burner. My biggest piece of advice for businesses when they start, day one, day -10 even, day -30, start thinking about the financial foundation of your business. You may not have the fundraising plan all put into place yet, but just know that you are going to, it's very likely, highly likely, that you are going to need some sort of fundraising down the road. Start preparing for that on day one. So what that means is make sure your books are in order. Make sure your accounting is intact. Make sure, if you don't have a specific individual to focus on that, think about outsource groups. There are plenty of very reputable and very reputable groups in the space that know this space very, very well, understand the accounting needs of a business in the space, the bookkeeping, all that kind of stuff. Leverage that. Leverage those relationships, leverage those companies out there, but just make sure your financing is not an afterthought. The finance and the books are not an afterthought.
Love that. Thank you for going back there. Actually, that's really what we're talking about next week. And the point is that you need to have all that stuff buttoned down. I mentor, Jessica, with a lot of different brands that are trying to get money, trying to figure out how to grow a business, et cetera, for Nutrition Capital Network, Circle Providers, the Circle, anyhow, a lot of different groups. But the point is, a lot of people show up and say, you know what, I sold $5 last year and I'm going to sell $5 million next year, with no clear path to how they get there. But to your point, they overlook the key things that you need to have in place in your business. So from my perspective, again, we'll be talking about this next week, your business plan is your roadmap. And your business plan should be so robust that I could give it to someone else and they could run the company for me on my behalf in my absence. Meaning that all that stuff that's figured out there and that's in that is going to help you stay on the path and help you stay within whatever guardrails you've set so you can grow and scale. So then when we have an opportunity for something incremental, that's where you come in. But to go back to this for a minute, the reason this matters, and this is very, very important, so everyone listen to this, is that the more buttoned down you are, the more effective you're going to be at being able to get venture capital money or angel money. And the better your terms will be in terms of your ability to negotiate. Say, here's what I expect from my company. Think about Shark Tank. And a lot of companies come on and say, hey, I'm a nice guy, got a cool product, got a great slogan. Isn't this neat? And they, of course, don't get anything. But the companies that come in and they're dialed in and they've got a strategy, they've got a plan, they know exactly where they're going to be tomorrow and next year and the year beyond that in terms of sales and growth and distribution, those companies are the ones that can negotiate more effectively. And that all comes back to how buttoned down are you? So thank you for sharing it. That's why you've got to know your finances. It's why you've got to have your bookkeeping. Oh, and by the way, before you talk to an expert like Jessica, you need to have answers to those questions because she's going to ask them. So does that help frame that? Does that sound good?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very, very well said. Yeah, and I think that, another tool in that tool belt, and, that's a good segue to the general discussion today, is understanding the various funding options out there, depending on the stage of your business, what your cash need is, and what your go forward plan is. So, Dan mentioned VC, et cetera, and equity. Equity has been a major source of funding in this space for a long time, and it is it's a necessary form of funding, right? And a good source of funding that can really help you catapult your growth. And bringing this back to Finance 101, that is what equity funding should be used for. Any sort of need that's going to give your business a long-term ROI, equity funding is the right capital for that. It matches the time frame of when you're going to see that ROI with the time frame of your payback to your investors, which is in the form of a liquidity event or a sale. However, that's not, one, it's an expensive form of capital, because what seems to be a small dollar amount today can turn into a large dollar amount that is going to be paid out in the future. But it may not be necessarily the right fit given what that cash crunch need is. So debt is not at all a replacement for equity, but a really good supplement to that growth capital. So those expensive dollars aren't being used up too quickly, and aren't being used on inventory build for inventory that's going to sit on a shelf. You want to use that equity capital for brand building, market spend, headcount, anything that's going to increase that long-term ROI for your business. And then for other more short-term funding needs, debt can be a really good solution. To take that thought even further, under the debt umbrella, there are a number of debt products that fit for very specific cash needs. So I'm sure as we continue the dialogue today, we'll talk a little bit about some of those specific products and what the specific need is that those products will best help you with.
Thanks, I appreciate that. So back up a little bit, just so everyone's clear. Equity means you're giving away a chunk of your business to someone else. You're saying you think of everything as a scale. So I'm going to give you a chunk of my business, and you're going to give me a bunch of cash. And with that cash, I'm going to help run my business. So equity. And then debt financing, you think about your balance sheet, and you think about how much, what are your account payables, et cetera. So that's how that fits in. But the reason this matters is as you're trying to grow your brand, and like Jessica said, and thank you for pointing this out, is that growing and scaling a brand with debt equity using your credit card is the worst example. That is extremely expensive because of what it requires and how it limits your ability down the road. We'll talk about that in a minute as well, I'm sure. But equity is the best way to fuel your overall brand, I like the way you put that. It's the foundation of what you need to be able to grow and scale your brand. One of the things that Stu and I talked about is how, as an equity type investor, how he would either sell the brand or actually buy the brand, become an investor in the brand as a partner. And so that's critically important because you want to align with a company that understands your customer, your market, your segment, et cetera. This is why I invited Jessica on today, because this is something she helps with a different type of resource, a different set of tools. So Jessica, as we're talking about as a brand, let's say that I've got my first round of investment. And by the way, like we said, this is something that doesn't happen overnight. You've got to be vetted. You've got to have, you see people get a deal on Shark Tank. That doesn't mean they automatically get that deal. Sometimes it takes months for any money to show up. Well, what do you do in the interim? How do you grow your brand? How do you buy the inventory, et cetera? So that's you've got to plan for that ahead. So thank you for sharing that. So in your position, how do you help a brand? Let's say that I'm working with you. First of all, let's back up. What do I need to know? Why would I work with someone that offers services and tools like you now that we've talked about the equity piece?
Sure. So my Dwight Funding's product, again, is an asset-based lending revolving line of credit. It is really there to support the company's working capital needs. Why does it exist? So a CPG brand has a heavy need for working capital. So why? One, is it always going to require inventory build? You have a tangible product that you are going to sell. You need to have that product manufactured before you can sell it. Oftentimes, your manufacturers are going to have terms where you might have to pay a certain amount up front, a certain amount upon delivery. But even when that inventory is delivered and you have paid 100% of the cost to acquire that inventory, it still hasn't been sold and it still hasn't been paid for by your customer. Now, brands that have had experience with many of the large distributors in the space, call it a Unify, a KeHE, it takes time to get paid for the inventory even once it has been sold. So now you have a cash outlay to purchase the inventory needed to sell. You then have to sell that inventory. And then once that inventory is sold, you're not paid for 30, 60, 90 days. So how do you fund your operations in that time period, from the point you put money out to the point you actually get paid for that product? My product is a very good solution for that. So we basically lend a percentage on whatever inventory you have on hand and a percentage of whatever AR you have. And we give you that money up front. And then when you're paid for when you're paid on that AR, when you're paid for your sale, you pay that line down, that balance is paid down automatically. So it's a really good product for that particular need. There are other products out there. So what you could say, an easier way to think about that is smoothing out your cash flows, smoothing out your cash so that you're not having a large outlay of cash, your bank account's low, and then you get a bunch of money in 90 days and your bank account's high again. This just really smooths out that cash outlay for you so that you can manage your operations in the meantime. Another product that is prevalent in this space and can really serve a lot of, have a really good purpose for brands is purchase order financing. Could be before, could be as your inventory has already been developed, but before you sell a product to a Unify, a KeHE, Whole Foods, whatever, you're going to get an invoice. You're going to get a PO. You're going to get a purchase order. And you never want to say no to that purchase order, but you might need help finding the funds because maybe you have had some sort of cash outlay and your bank account isn't as high as you'd like it to be. Purchase order lenders serve that exact purpose. They fund a percentage of your purchase order, pay the manufacturer directly for you, and when that product is sold off, they pay the purchase order lender, and then the purchase order lender flows through any additional funds into the business. But what it does is it enables you to say yes to that order versus having a tight cash position, having to say no, and maybe not getting another purchase order from that customer again. So there's a lot of opportunity costs that you are avoiding there. And then there are other products for earlier stage businesses, such as cash flow and revenue-based products, where perhaps the business isn't quite, doesn't quite qualify yet for an asset-based revolving line of credit, but you need some funds. Specifically for businesses that have gotten a lot of revenue in the past couple months, a revenue-based lender will lend you a percentage of whatever your prior 4 or 5 months of cash flow or revenue was, which oftentimes can give you a bit more availability than maybe an ABL or purchase order lender will. It's a little more expensive because it's a little more risky for those lenders, but it's another option available for earlier stage businesses. So I probably just babbled too long. I'll let you take over for.
No, that's fine. I mean, let's back up a little bit. So I appreciate your sharing it because that's a lot of information. So
Yeah.
go back a little bit. I've shared this story a couple times where I was going through Expo West, and a brand that I talked to on the podcast, actually, I asked how things were going, and she broke down in tears, and she said that they don't know when they're going to get paid from UNFI. And UNFI, KE, they all do this. But the point is that they sold the product, and now they don't know when they're going to get the monies that they need to support the rest of the business. In fact, actually, Eric Skay, when he was on, he talked about how his wife called and said, hey, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is that we just sold a truckload of stuff. The bad news is that we just got a check for, it was like a $19,000 sale. And the bad news was that they got $12.34. So because of all the, anyhow, there's a lot to that. We could go spend a lot of time going into that. But the point is that if you're a brand and you're expecting $19,000 and you get $12.34, oops, now what? And
Right.
yeah, so that's why this is so important. So that's inventory. So let's talk a little bit more about inventory. So inventory, just to make sure I understand, make sure that we're being clear with everyone else. If I'm a brand and I have an opportunity to get incremental distribution or incremental stores, et cetera, we're talking about inventory as a product. I mean, as part of what I'm doing. So how do I approach you? How do I come to you? When does it make sense for me to come to you to focus on that specific product?
Yeah. So good question. So here's what I'll say. I would say asset-based lenders in general are going to want to see a bit more maturity in the business before they start lending. So I would say a company needs to be, call it 1-2 million in annual sales before an asset-based lending product will be readily available. My biggest piece of advice is don't wait until you need the money to try to get the money. The reason for that is, generally speaking, when you need money the most, your balance sheet looks the worst.
Good point.
And an asset-based lender is going to focus on your balance sheet. They're gonna first focus on your collateral and the health of your collateral, the health of your AR, the health of your inventory. But then they're going to want to make sure that the company's cash position is okay, and et cetera, et cetera. Specifically relative to burn, cash position relative to burn is healthy. So what I would recommend is, well, first of all, I might be biased, but I always think having a revolving line of credit for a working capital heavy business it's really just a good thing to have, because there's going to be times that you want to build your inventory beyond what you have it at, and you're going to have a big AR balance hopefully one day. So something like a working capital line really helps that. So getting one started a little bit early before you have that huge crunch need isn't necessarily a bad thing. And then you have developed a relationship with a lender, and when your crunch time comes, they're more than happy to step up and assist and fund with those inventory needs. Also, it always takes time to fund, right? So you want to work backward from when you expect that need to really come in, like really present itself. Work backwards to figure out, hey, how long is it going to take me to go through this process, get approved, get funded, and then, will there be enough buffer that I still get approved because my balance sheet still is healthy when I'm applying. Another thing that I will say, and that I'll kind of go back to, Dan, that you pointed out earlier is talking about getting you paid from UNFI, KHE, and the dollar amount not quite being what you expect it to be when you get paid. A big piece of advice that I very often give to brands is at an early stage, it is really important to surround yourself with friendly capital providers and capital providers that really understand the space that you play in. If you're working with a lender that doesn't understand the food and bev space and doesn't understand how dilution is affected by a UNFI and a KHE, it's not going to be advantageous to you. Because when a lender gives you a percentage, lends a percentage on your invoice, and then you only get 75% paid on that invoice, they're not going to be happy. Whereas if you work with a lender that understands that and anticipates that, they're going to work it into their formulas, and it's expected. So there's no harm, no foul. So I'll stop there now, but I wanted to make sure that I touched on that point, Dan.
Oh, that's a great point. And people need to be thinking about this. And I appreciate the fact that you're talking about finding friendly capital providers. This is where relationship building matters so very much. I used to, years ago, dating myself, would help people understand how to develop a credit rating, et cetera. Used to work for Standard & Poor's, et cetera. And it was about helping brands at a very early stage understand why that matters. And I would say, for example, go out and get a credit card, a store credit card, and buy something, a pair of shoes. It doesn't matter, but buy something and then don't pay it back right away. Make a couple payments to establish yourself as being a credible risk to that particular company. And a lot of people would say, but wait a minute, hold on, I can pay cash for it. I said, that's not the point. There's credit worthiness, and then there's, God, it's been a while since I've thought about this. So there's the amount of credit you have, and there's credit worthiness that goes into that. So if your credit worthiness, in other words, if we only trust you to pay back $100, we're only going to give you $100 worth of debt. And you want to slowly build that up over time, like you said, love how you put that, so very relevant. You need to do that when you're in a good position, so that when you're not in a good position, you've got that fallback. And so as you're developing that relationship with yourself and the lender, and you're proving your credit worthiness, that's where what Jessica's talking helps even more. So Jessica, if I'm a brand, can I start developing that with you? Or is that something that you recommend brands do outside of you before they come to you, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So here's what I would say. Look, we may not be able to start a lending relationship at much earlier than that 1-2 million in sales mark.
Okay.
But getting to know founders and getting to know brands and seeing their progress pre-million in sales, pre-2 million in sales, all the way up leading to that point, absolutely is encouraged. Knowing, first of all, rapport matters so much. I think that we are all very lucky that we are in the space that we're in, because our space it's a small community, and it's incredibly friendly, including, a lot of the lenders out there. And believe it or not, there's a whole big bad world out there of lenders. They're not always friendly, and they're not, so I think it's really important to leverage the ability to build a relationship, because everybody's so accessible in this space. I can tell you, if I know a founder and I have seen their progress and I've been excited about their growth from day 1 or day 10 or whatever, I'm going to be excited to work with them when they get to the point that I can. So I absolutely think it's important to start building a relationship, but not just for us, for the brand as well and for the founders as well, because the more conversations you have with me, the more you'll know whether or not you want to work with me. And, you want to find that capital. You want to find that right fit. Specifically, when you're scaling, you want to be surrounded by people that are excited about what you're doing.
Well, and thank you for sharing that, because that is so important. Actually, that's one of the key things that we talk about a lot on this, is that getting money from an ATM machine that's cold and hard, it's cold and plastic or whatever, they're just going to expect their money back right away. But if you're working with someone like Jessica, who might have a Rolodex, who might be able to help you, guide you, give you some information, understand more about the consumer that you're supporting, that helps. And then again, the relationship is so very important. So thank you for sharing that. So that deals with inventory. And inventory is, I have a customer that wants to buy their product, and I'm funding my inventory, so I've got enough on hand to be able to support everyday sales, etc. So the second thing you talked about was purchase order. So purchase orders, when someone comes to you and says, I want to buy stuff that you don't have in your warehouse. So purchase order being different in that now you as a brand need to go out and fill that purchase order. So how do you work with me as a brand that has a PO, a purchase order, so that I can fulfill that? Can you explain a little bit more about that part of the relationship? What do I need to be? How, what size, et cetera? And by the way, keep going. Remember that this keeps going back to what we talked about earlier, where you've got to have all your ducks in a row. This is part of your business plan, et cetera. But so I've got a PO. When do I come to you? How do you help me out?
Yeah. So I'll say that this goes back to what I was saying initially, where, Dwight Funding, as a team, we try to take a consultative approach, and we can't do it all, right? So we're actually not a purchase order lender. So if somebody comes to me for a purchase order lender, I will connect them with the groups that focus on that specific product.
Okay.
So purchase order lending, there's a bit more risk to it. However, there are purchase order lenders that can fund purchase orders far sooner than I could do a revolving line of credit. Because if you have a promise to purchase from a UNFI, a KeHE, or any retailer for that matter, that is, for a purchase order lender, that is an exciting thing for them to help you fund your manufacturing on. Now, with that said, it's a bit pricier because there's an added level of risk to purchase order funding, and that is production risk. Anything could happen from the time that you get that purchase order to the time you're actually giving that product to the end customer. There could be issues with production, packaging could come out wrong, so on and so forth. So because of that production risk, a PO lender is going to be a little more expensive. However, the way that it works is they will take that purchase order and say, hey, okay, it's going to cost you this much to fund this purchase order. It's going to cost you this much to produce the product for this purchase order. We will pay your manufacturer up front. They will do the manufacturing process. You'll sell that product to X customer, and when X customer pays, we will recoup the funds that we lent you, and you will get the remaining balance. So it helps for a very short-term funding need. It's a great product, though, because you don't, again, it can help an earlier stage business where you may not have that asset-based lender, full-rounded product and relationship lender, but you need help quickly, and you don't want to say no to that order because there is opportunity cost to saying no. You might not get another order. If you fulfill that order and everything goes well, you now have a customer and hopefully a repeat customer. So it's a very important product, and I'm glad you're touching on that, Jan, because it is a separate cash crunch need than a revolving line of credit that's continuously smoothing out your cash flows.
And I love the fact that you keep saying smoothing out your cash flows, because I love the analogy. When you think about the ebbs and flows of a business, great visualization. Back to the PO, a lot of people, brands, the mistake a lot of brands make is that they assume that is a guarantee. as you just illustrated, it is not. It is not a sale until it's actually a sale because of the reasons you mentioned: packaging, production issues, etc. Imagine, for example, who would ever have thought this would happen, that you're selling a product and all of a sudden COVID comes along and now you physically can't get the product into a store. Your product's perishable. You don't have the ability to get it in there within a certain amount of time, etc. Think about all the things that could happen, thus the risk. And by the way, on that note, when you think about the risk, this is what all debt is, all financing is. This is what your business is, the value of your business. If you can go to any lender, whether it be an equity lender or a debt lender, and reduce the amount of risk, thus the business plan, the more solid you are in terms of a business, the better the foundation that you build on, that reduces the risk to them. So if you want to put yourself in the best position possible, you need to be thinking about, how do I reduce the risk as much as possible to whomever I'm talking to, so that I can get the incremental funds, so that I can leverage that relationship to get money when I need money. Your thoughts?
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with everything you're saying. I mean, I can't harp on it enough. Having that plan in place and not putting the things that are going to matter down the road on the back burner for now because they don't matter yet. It's setting yourself up for failure.
It is.
It is. And back to what you were saying, Dan, about risk. You're absolutely right. The more buttoned up you are, and and the more history you have, and the more execution you can demonstrate, is all going to reduce risk. And that. And by the way, giving away a piece of your business for equity, that's a part. The equity provider is getting rewarded for their risk in helping you with your growth plans and executing on those growth plans. So, yeah, I agree with you in every area.
Thank you. So, and I appreciate you sharing that. So when you're thinking about risk, imagine that back in the old days, pre-COVID, if you would put your money into a CD or something like that at a bank, very slow, little low returns, very low risk, pretty much guaranteed for the most part. But the point is, you would get almost nothing out of it. High risk would be going to Vegas and throwing it down on the table.
Right.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is the mindset that brands need to adopt when they're thinking about growing and scale your business. There are pros and cons to everything you do. And this again comes back to, and thank you for sharing that, at the beginning of the conversation, you need to have a solid business plan. You need to have a solid roadmap. And when you're talking about growing and scaling your brand, another issue that I find brands run into, another huge mistake brands make, is they take on any distribution, whether or not it makes sense or not. And that's a problem. So I share this example a lot. I was working with a brand in California that got picked up by a distributor. The distributor put them in a store in Florida, a store in Indiana, and a store in Louisiana. That doesn't make any sense at all because they cannot support that business. So this is where, if you've got a solid business plan and you've got all your numbers dialed in and you've got a roadmap to where you want to be, now if I call up Jessica, I'm reducing that risk. If I go to Jessica and say, hey, guess what? I've got an opportunity to support a store 3,000 miles away or whatever, and another store another 1,000 miles in a different direction, she's going to say, sorry, maybe. But so those are some of the things you need to be thinking about. So thank you. So anything else about purchase order, or do you want to jump into revenue based?
Yeah, we can jump into revenue based.
Okay, so what is that? Why does it matter? Why do I care? How do I use it? If I'm a brand, when would I start thinking about that? At what point would it make sense? And how does it impact what I'm doing?
Yeah. So there are some revenue-based products out there that are, I like to think of them as a solution for earlier stage brands that might not be able to find debt from a more traditional source. The reason I say that is it's expensive debt. It'll still be less expensive than equity in the long run, assuming plans go as growth goes as planned. But it is a solution. It is a solution. And basically the way that it works is, rather than a group like mine that might want to see historical 12 months of historical, P&L and balance sheet. We want to see your growth, how you've grown, your growth path forward. These revenue-based lenders will say, okay, maybe you launched in January, but over the past, 7 months now, I can't believe how quick this time is going. Over the past 7 months, you guys have demonstrated huge revenue growth. So we're going to take the past 4 months, average out your past 4 months of revenue, and give you X times that average revenue as funding. So it's also a very quick source of capital. Now, again, it's going to be expensive, but those kind of lenders tend to work pretty quickly. So I would say, just given the cost, it's more of a, if you really, really need the cash, like, do you need to hit payroll in a couple weeks? And you think that could be tough and you just need to get over a hump, this could be a good solution. They're generally a quick payback, but I would say that that's probably more of a last option when you've exhausted all the others. But it is a solution that's out there, so it's worth talking about, and there is a market for it.
Go ahead, please.
No, please.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. So we're not talking about a loan shark necessarily, just kidding. But yet this is where you cannot afford to miss payroll. You cannot afford to have employees walk off. You cannot afford to pay the lease on the truck or the whatever because you needed to deliver the product. That makes good sense. And again, we're talking about the risk reward to you, the investor, not the investor, the lender, and why that matters so much. So what other products are there that we should be talking about that people can consider? So we've got inventory, purchase order, and revenue.
Yep. So I think the other product worth mentioning is venture debt.
Okay.
So venture debt serves a unique purpose as well. Venture debt really extends, it kind of bridges you to your next round. So I would say this applies to, it doesn't. So you can get venture debt even pre-revenue, but that tends to be more in like the world of tech where investors come in and put a large amount of money into the business when it's an idea. That doesn't happen as much in consumer. So venture debt requirements is they want to see that there's a venture group in there, that a venture group has already funded your business. Now, if you as a company know that your cash runway is 6 months, but in 8 and 9 months, you have some big revenue jumps happening because you're getting placement in XXX store. And you would rather, before raising again, you would rather achieve those milestones so you get a better valuation on your business when you do raise again. A venture debt loan can extend that runway 6 to 12 months. An asset-based revolving line of credit, lending on the AR, lending on the inventory, it smooths that cash out for you in your bank, gives you, 2 to 3 extra months of runway. Venture debt is really built to give you that 6, 12 months of additional runway. And I call it quasi-equity. They are lending on the fact that you have a venture group in there and that you're going to be able to raise again. So they're taking on a bit of equity risk. And for to be compensated for that, they will actually take warrants in your business. So they are taking a very small piece of your business as well. It's going to be far less than if you were to do an actual equity round, but it is a lot riskier, so they are going to want to be compensated in that way. So it serves almost as equity. covers your cash shortfalls, your profit shortfalls over that 6 to 12 months while you hit those milestones, and enables you to get a larger valuation once those milestones are hit. So I think that that's another important, product to discuss, because it does serve a very specific purpose. And I think that I just think that founders that understand that there are various sources out there to serve very specific needs have the right toolbox and are well equipped to fund their business the right way.
Thank you for sharing. And that's why we're doing this, is that we're talking about all the different vehicles. And the reason this matters is because you need to have a plan ahead of time to be able to take advantage of some of this. And so as far as the venture debt, I love the idea. I love the fact that you're talking about that, because I don't think a lot of people think about that. So let's break down the business. It's about buying things and selling things, right? And so as you're growing and scaling your brand, you've got to have your strategy. You've got to have your blueprint. You've got to have your roadmap, whatever you want to call it. And along that roadmap, as you said, you need to be thinking proactively so that you know that you're going to run out of runway in 6 months. And that was a key point I wanted to make. So thank you for sharing that. But if you know that you're going to be cash strapped in 6 months, you can start planning for that today and reduce the risk for whoever might invest or whoever might subsidize that. So what I do is I help the brands grow and scale and increase the runway with strategies and stuff. That's why I'm focused on the trade marketing piece. So as an example, and I wanted to use this for this reason, if you know what your average spend is, how much you're spending every month in trade marketing, and you can maximize your promotional efficiencies and get an extra month or an extra 2 months, that's one strategy. That's very effective. But even with that, I should say, you still need to know at what point are you going to be in a position where you need more money to fund growth. And this goes back to where we started, but you've got to have a solid business plan in place. And again, can't say it enough, as much as you can reduce the risk to you, that's going to help you more importantly. So to kind of recap, it's about relationship. It's about proving your credit worthiness. It's about understanding your business well enough so that you know when you're going to have a need before you have a need, not after the emergency. And then at the same time, it's about knowing about the solutions that are out there that you can leverage depending on what your needs are. Does that frame it pretty good? Any thoughts around that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the only other thing that I would add to that is use the network, use your advisors. If there was no other takeaway from, all of this, it is ask the people that know. If you don't know, ask the people that know. And they'll help guide you. And as we discussed, Dan, earlier, this is a small and friendly community. People want to help. So if you don't know the answer and you don't know the right solution, and you don't know who the right partner is, and you don't know where to start the relationship building, ask. That's all I'd say.
Well, thank you, because going back to, again, building that trust with your potential investor, it's a lot easier to go to them and say, you know what, I've got a problem. How do I solve it before it becomes an emergency, rather than saying, hey, guess what? I screwed up. And I missed an opportunity. I didn't fill a PO. I didn't whatever. And that could be catastrophic to your business. So thank you for sharing that. And again, that's what makes natural is that there's so many people here that are really rooting for you. And by the way, keep in mind that your success is also the success of whoever invests in your money, in your business.
Right.
Think about it this way. They want to know, they want to trust that they're going to get a return at the end of the day. And if you can help them feel good about that, and help them feel good about the fact, help them sleep well at night, they're going to bend over backwards to help you even more. And then when you get to that point where you need that second round of investment, et cetera. And by the way, on that note, keep in mind that those investments, again, they don't happen overnight. It takes time to get vetted, get people involved. In fact, actually working with some different brands that are trying to get funding right now, especially during COVID, they're struggling. So deals that would take a month or two are now taking 4 or 5, 6 months. And a
Right.
lot of the money's drying up. So this is another reason why you need to be prepared. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I agree. Diligence is harder these days when you can't, meet with people in person. Um, I just absolutely agree. Start the process and start the dialogue as soon as you can.
Yeah, and be aware of this because, another challenge that we're running in today is that big retailers are going back to the big brands that got them, that can pay the slotting and all those ridiculous fees that are overburdened or overtaxing to small brands. And it's making it difficult for small brands to get on their shelf. So that's another thing. Again, this is why you put together your business plan. This is why you have everything in place, get dialed in, so that dialed in the sense that you've got the solutions, you've got possible solutions to help solve your problems down the road. Thank you so much for sharing that. Any other thoughts that you want to share? I know we're coming up to the top of the hour.
Yeah, no, I think that this was a well-rounded discussion. I would just say, biggest takeaways is day one, even before day one, focus on your business plan, as Dan has mentioned many times, and rightfully so. It's an important thing. Just because financing or the accounting or the books may not be hugely important today, start it as if it's the most important thing day one. Start to build relationships in the community, and in terms of fundraising, figure out what your real need is, find the solution that caters to that need, and then find the right partner to help you fund that need. And and that's it.
Thank you for sharing them. Are there any
Sure.
questions that anyone wants to ask? Because we've got a couple questions. So Janice asked, will this be recorded? Yes. I mean, it is recorded. Will this be available again? Yes, it will be available. I did not record it in the cloud, so I need to convert it to a video and then put it on YouTube. And because of this topic being so important, so valuable, I will be stripping off the audio and putting it on the podcast. Not this coming week, but the week after. So you can look forward to it there. And then, of course, the video will be out and you'll be able to see Jessica's smiling face and get to know us a little bit better. So how should a company prepare for the debt process? That's asked by Tom.
Tom, great question. Again, I think first and foremost, I think it's important to identify what your specific debt need is. Then find the lenders that provide those specific debt needs, cater to those specific needs, and then start having conversations. Start talking to each one of them, figuring out who's a good fit, who you think you can have the best relationship with, and who's going to serve the best value to the business as it continues to scale, even above and beyond that capital, right? And then just, again, make sure the books are in order. Make sure the P&L and balance sheet is accurate. Make sure if it's an inventory need, that you have inventory controls in place, that the AR is up to date as much as it can be, things like that. And lean on your advisors as well. Like, say, hey, I'm thinking about going through a debt process. Do you think my books are in order? What do you think I can do to make it a little bit better, or whatever the case? So I would say build the relationship. First of all, figure out what your need is. Make sure you're finding the debt partner that caters to that need. Build relationships, determine the best partner, and then make sure your books are in order.
Well said. Thank you. And that's why please reach out to us if you've got a question. So Deborah says, remember to connect with your Small Business Development Center. They can help you prepare for financing and connect you with various types of funding, and their services are free. Oh, well said. Okay, thanks, Deborah. Any
Great.
thoughts? Anything you want to put in, add to that?
No, I think that's great. That's a great resource.
Thanks, Deborah. Appreciate that. So, okay, the next question from Barb. What are some of the quantitative considerations of bringing on debt?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've touched on some of them, which is just figuring out like what your specific need is and making sure that whatever the terms are and whatever the structure is catering to that specific need. And then you want to make sure that, you know, so that I don't know if I would call this quantitative, but it's a part of the structure, so it matters. You want to make sure that you're working with a flexible structure. And what I mean by that is you don't want too many financial covenants. You don't want too many quantitative check-ins with your business or with your lender. A lot of lenders out there put financial covenants in place that are based off your projections. So they'll say, okay, your projections say that you're going to hit this revenue threshold by Q3. And then if you don't hit that revenue threshold by Q3, you might be in trouble with your lender. I know I work with enough growing brands to know that projections are not always hit. So if you can avoid things like that, avoid it, because there's no reason for friction down the road. We all know that. And I think that's also brings us back to working with a partner that understands your stage and understands your space. Because a partner that understands those things knows that projections aren't always hit. And you just don't want to have that friction down the road at the time you might need it most. You might need that lending most, and you don't want friction with your lender then. So just try to make sure those financial check-ins are light or not there at all.
Well, and this is where you can actually help negotiate by having a solid business plan, all that other stuff,
Right.
and help them remove some of those guardrails, because this is one time where breaking the rules can get you in a lot of trouble. So thank you for sharing
Totally.
that. So,
For sure.
okay, so just a minute. So what advice can you give a company considering the debt process?
Yeah, so similar to the first question asked, books in order, understand what your need actually is to find the product that caters to that need, and then find the partner that is the best personality fit and the best, most flexible, friendly capital for you.
Great. Well, I appreciate
And don't start the process too late.
Thank you. Yeah, that's so critically important. You don't want to wait till after you've got the emergency, after the
Right.
pipes break, so to speak. Thank you so much for coming on. Can you tell us a little bit about Dwight Lending, and then how do we get a hold of you, and what's unique, special, or whatever that we need to know when we're thinking about why we should call you, or how do we connect with you? What's the best way to work with you?
Yeah, so you can certainly reach me on LinkedIn. You can, by all means, there's a contact us section on our website as well. I'm more than happy to have conversations, whether it's about our product or whether it's about, what other funding solutions are out there. As mentioned before, we fall into the asset-based lending revolving line of credit category. So we are lending on AR, lending on inventory. With that said, we try to be the best funding partner we can be to the businesses that we work with. Relationship is very important to us, as it should be to you guys. So, we like to add a lot of value outside of just that AR and inventory lending. However, that's our main product. And anytime your AR is starting to get high and you don't want to wait for those payments, our solution is probably a good solution to consider. Or if you need help on the inventory side, or whatever the case may be.
And so to go one step further, this is where a specialist matters. So instead of just going to a general banker that loans money, now you're going to someone who understands your specific business, understands your specific needs, knows how to custom or tailor make their recommendation to help you out the most. And this is why going to a specialist, a professional, an expert like Jessica makes all the sense in the world. Any last parting thoughts?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. And by all means, if anybody has questions, reach out.
Yeah, your phone number, your name is in the chat. I'll be certain to put
Great.
your information in on the sales,
Awesome.
on the podcast page and in the show notes. So thank you so much for your time, Jessica. Thank you everyone for showing up. Don't forget, next week we're going to talk about your business plan. That is the foundation that makes all this stuff work. And remember, that's what helps reduce the risk when you're going to talk to someone like Jessica or any investor and any retailer, by the way, too. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Talk soon. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.